Hi everybody, welcome back to Between the Lines. My name's Julian, I'm an obsessive reader and used book collector, and welcome to my Spring TBR. Winter is finally gone, at least mostly gone. I live in Canada, so it's always a toss-up as to when winter's gonna actually end, but we haven't had a blizzard for a little while, although I'm still holding out for an eventual last blizzard. But for the most part, spring has started, and with that comes a new season and a new TBR. I briefly touched on what I'm going to read this year and this spring in my 2022 TBR video, but I just kind of wanted to break down exactly what I want to read in the next couple of months, what I've read so far because we're a little bit into April, and maybe a bit what I'm going to read in the summer and beyond. So let's start with the books I've read and am currently reading. Firstly, at the beginning of April, I read The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, and I really liked it. This was an awesome short story collection that had overarching themes and kind of a grander story to it than just a sort of cobbled together short story collection. It all took place for the most part on Mars and dealt with humans' expansion to the Red Planet and kind of what happened to the Martians there, and reflects a lot of what humans have done in the past in history and how that would kind of translate in a futuristic setting. And I thought it was super interesting, and what I really appreciated about this book was how they had different kind of tones and genres to the different stories. It wasn't just all sci-fi, and this was explicitly not hard sci-fi. There was a lot of fantastical elements as well, and even some stories that really branched off in genre, including some horror stuff and personal dramas and things dealing with social commentary as well. And after finishing The Martian Chronicles, I started the book, which I'm still reading, and I thought it was a nice kind of complement to The Martian Chronicles, and that's Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is a pretty famous book and one that a lot of people in the booktube community have talked about. First in a very famous sci-fi trilogy, the Red Rising trilogy, and I'm liking it so far. This was highly recommended to me by my brother and my cousin, and initially I was a little skeptical on it because it sounded a little too YA and Hunger Gamesy for me, and while I definitely see those comparisons and maybe a bit of YA-ness in the book, I'm still really enjoying it, especially in the militaristic and kind of political, ideological ideas and themes it's diving into. It's action-packed and very modern and super fast-paced, a bit more fast-paced than I'm used to. I've been reading a bunch of The Wheel of Time over the last few months, so I'm used to a slower pace and a lot of older books, and especially coming off The Martian Chronicles, this thing was just going from start to finish. It has been so fast, but it's a lot of fun and I'm really liking it. I also listened to the audiobook of Sapiens, the famous nonfiction book kind of encompassing the entire history of humanity, and if you've been following my channel, you know that I have a hard time with nonfiction. I find it really hard to get through and I don't read a whole lot of it. Overall, it painted a really interesting picture of humanity and our entire history starting from kind of the Stone Age until now. And you know what, for a nonfiction book, it wasn't bad. Wasn't the most boring one I've read for sure. So that's it for what I've been reading. Now let's get on to what I will read for the remainder of April, May, and a bit of June. Spring is a time of beginnings, and I took that theme and ran with it, and a lot of what's on my Spring TBR is starting a lot of new series. That includes Red Rising, like I mentioned, and continuing stuff like The Wheel of Time, of course, but I'm also going to start 2 other series that I've been very interested in getting into. Another series on this list, like Red Rising, was recommended to me both by my brother and my cousin, and that's the First Law trilogy, the original trilogy, which I'm finally going to start sometime this month. There's so much hype for this series. Everyone on BookTube knows about these books. They've had so much success and a lot of people have just praised these, so I'm eager to get into them. I feel like it's going to be a bit of an adjustment coming from the more Wheel of Time-esque fantasy that I've been reading over the last few months, but nonetheless, it sounds very interesting, and I haven't read a whole lot of grimdark. I'm pretty sure this can be classified as grimdark. Unless I'm totally wrong, then please correct me, but it'll be a nice little change up. And just like many others on this list, the start of a new series and a new adventure for me. Another one I'm going to be starting, and this is probably going to be sometime in May when it's a bit warmer, is a series that I've had in my collection for over a year but haven't started. I've kept putting it off, just waiting for the right time, but I think the time is soon. And that's the Master and Commander series by Patrick O'Brian. Master and Commander is one of my favorite movies of all time, and when I found out that it was actually based on a book, and not only one book, but a 20-book series, I said, okay, I just need to get all of these and consume them because that sounds amazing. I haven't read a ton of historical fiction, but I love nautical stuff and exploration and this time period, and of course, being a huge fan of the movie, I have to read these books. So that's a journey that I'm going to start sometime in May, and as I said, it's 20 books, so it's going to take me a while. I'm going to be in no rush to read all these. I just want to savor them and enjoy them, like Wheel of Time, where I read them maybe once a month, month and a half. So no rush, and just something I want to sit down and enjoy because I feel like I'm really gonna like these books. And speaking of the Wheel of Time, I will be continuing the series sometime in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to start The Fires of Heaven, book 5 in the series. And coming off of book 4, which was absolutely my favorite of the ones I've read so far, I'm very eager to get into this one. I don't know how this ranks among the books. I don't really want to look too much into it because going forward, I want to start making my own opinions instead of being informed by what others are saying. But if it's anything like book 4 and continues the storylines that were introduced in that one, I think I'm going to enjoy it. I also might read New Spring, the prequel of The Wheel of Time, which a lot of people say you can read after book 5. And the podcast I follow, The Wheel Weaves, I'm pretty sure in their reading order, they read it after book 5. And one of the hosts of that podcast is reading the series for the first time. So the other host, the expert in the series, if they think that it's a good time to read New Spring after book 5, then maybe I will too. But I have heard that maybe you should read it in publication order, so I believe that's after book 10. One of my goals in reading for 2022 is to get into a lot more classic science fiction, and I've read a handful of that. I've read some Asimov, I started getting into Robert A. Heinlein and discovering his works. I've read some Arthur C. Clarke and want to continue his works and reading Childhood's End. Just like Rendezvous with Rama in 2001, these are pretty short books. They're not super long by any means of the classic sci-fi stretch of books, but I really like Arthur C. Clarke. Both 2001 and Rendezvous with Rama were awesome books. I really like how he blends super high concept sci-fi ideas with really grounded, really just average people doing their jobs and experiencing these crazy things. I think that lends more out of this world aspect with a bit more reality and connection to them, so they don't seem so crazy. And I'm not totally sure about what Childhood's End is about. I just know it has a classic status in the sci-fi community, so this is another one that I'm very eager to get into. And continuing on with classic sci-fi, I'm going to be reading Ringworld by Larry Niven. This is one I have in physical form, but I'm finding that I'm running out of time to read all these books. My TBR for this year was super ambitious, so I think I'm going to do the audio version of this one. The library has it. There's a couple weeks wait on it, so I think by the time maybe I'm done Wheel of Time or something else, I'll come around to this and listen to it while I'm reading the physical edition of another book on my TBR. I started off this year going super hard into books, just reading 2 books a week plus an audiobook. I'm really enjoying the process of reading this much, but I feel like, there's other stuff I want to do. There's other types of media that I want to interact with. I've recently started exploring the Criterion channel and all the great classic and forward films they have there, and a library service called Canopy, which has a bunch of the same type of films, and they lend out 6 films a month to use 6 credits. So I've been using that a little bit, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm also in the middle of playing Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, the Soul series from Software. That whole series is my favorite set of games, and I've never played Sekiro. It is so hard. It's so difficult and time consuming. So my reading time has taken a hit because of Criterion and Canopy and Sekiro. But once I'm done Sekiro, I think I'll be reading a bit more. But there's other types of things I'm passionate about. I need to give those some more time that reading absolutely consumed in the first part of this year. And the last book in my Spring TBR is The Honorable Schoolboy, book 2 in the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy series. That book is pretty famous, written by John le Carré, and is a very grounded, realistic take on spy work taking place in the 70s in England. Tons of people know about that book, but not a lot of people know that's actually part of a trilogy. I read the first book a few years ago, and in recently rewatching the movie this year, which is, a pretty decent movie, not as good as the book. I really wanted to finish that series, and to ease myself back into it, I think I'm going to listen to the audiobook for The Honorable Schoolboy, and then maybe at some point later this year, finish the trilogy with the book Smiley's People. John le Carré is definitely my favorite spy author. I prefer that sort of spy stuff as compared to the Ian Fleming 007 stuff. I find that stuff a little over the top and ridiculous and silly. I enjoy the movies for sure, but when it comes to spy books, I definitely prefer the more grounded takes on spy work. So that's basically what I want to be reading for April and May and the beginning of June. But continuing on from those books in the summer, I'm definitely going to finish the Red Rising trilogy. I'm going to read book 2 probably sometime in June or July, and then finish the 3rd one soon to wrap up the series. And I also plan on finishing the First Law trilogy in the summer as well, continuing with the Wheel of Time, Definitely getting more into Master and Commander. That's just going to be the right season for it. And summer for me is a big time to read fantasy. I really, really love reading fantasy in the summer. So I'm going to be reading those First Law books, and some Guy Gavriel Kay is another author I've been looking forward to getting into for a long time, whose work I'm finally going to start this summer. I think I'm going to start with Tigana. So that's it for my spring TBR and a little preview of what I'll be reading over the summer as well. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I talked about today and what your thoughts were on them, or if you have any more suggestions for books I should definitely read pretty soon or in the summer. So before you go, remember to do all the YouTube stuff like liking and subscribing. It always helps out and I really, really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for watching. Please remember to support your local library, and I'll see you next time.